What's up, everybody? This is Fishers of Men. The Wheel of Time is one of my favorite stories of all time. I read the books back in high school and college and really fell in love with them. I've been following the show and its production ever since they were announced. And I couldn't wait to start watching. Even though I knew there would be changes from the books, I had hope that the story would stay true to the original overall. Now that the whole season's out, I feel like I can actually start talking and making videos about the episodes without jumping to uncharitable conclusions. As I start getting back into the swing of making videos, I want to make videos about things I like, things I didn't like, things that don't make sense, all that. I want to cover the whole gamut of the Wheel of Time show. So today, I want to talk about Episode 8's Cold Open and why I have some big problems with it. Now, when I first saw it, I thought it was interesting. I enjoyed seeing the Age of Legends and Lews Therin. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there were some issues that I think caused problems with the story overall, and really pushes the story in a direction that is not present within the original books. They're unnecessary changes that were made to the history of the Wheel of Time that don't really improve the story in any way and arguably make it worse. Now, just to get this out of the way now, I'm not a person who's going to argue for a one-to-one adaptation of every word in the book. I understand that changes need to be made in adaptations like this. There are obviously many adaptations out there that depart from the source material for various reasons and still turn out to be great works of fiction in their own right. For example, I'm thinking of Haunting at Hill House, or Altered Carbon Season 1, or even The Prestige. So I do understand that changes need to be made in adaptations like this. However, I do think that changes really should be limited to things that are necessary either for time or for budget purposes. Changes to the overall story can cause huge issues and, in my opinion, should be limited in scope. That's not to say they can't ever work. I mean, I just gave 3 examples of places where they work very well. But when the original story is on the level of the Wheel of Time, I find it hard to believe that the show writers could improve it greatly by changing aspects of the story like what I'm about to talk about. So let's actually get into the meat of it. I know I said I wanted to talk about Episode 8's Cold Open, but I think I should start with Episode 1 just to explain where I'm coming from here. Now, the cold open for Episode 1 is, from what I've seen, pretty divisive. I know a lot of people lost interest in the show very quickly when watching that cold open because of the way Moiraine frames the war with the Shadow over 3,000 years ago. Now, in the cold open, Moiraine talks about the arrogance of men trying to chain darkness itself. But the way she says it makes it sound like everything was fine, and then men took it upon themselves to do something that wasn't necessary, and it caused the breaking of the world. This is a pretty big departure from the books, where they're in the middle of this massive war against the Shadow. And Lews Therin's plan to seal away the Dark One is pretty much a last-ditch effort to win the war. It's a desperation move. Obviously, not everyone agreed with it, but there wasn't really any better plan. Now, when I watched the first cold open, I thought, maybe this is just Moiraine misunderstanding the history of the War of the Shadow. You know, it was 3,000 years ago. I thought maybe the 8's taught their sisters that it was men's arrogance that led them to do what they did, rather than a last-ditch effort to win a war. My naive assumption was that they would address this in later episodes and kind of set the record straight. I saw a lot of people complaining about this cold open when it first came out, and in my mind they were complaining unnecessarily because I still held faith that there would be a reasonable explanation for this. And it turns out I was wrong. So, sorry to the people that I thought about making response videos to, I guess. So now we can fast forward to the Episode 8 cold open. In this, we see the dragon, Lews Therin Telamon, who, by the way, is called the Dragon Reborn in this cold open, which is kind of weird because as far as we know, he's the first one to take on the title of dragon. His soul is reborn every age, but I don't think that every age they call him the Dragon Reborn. That's just a side note, not necessarily what I want to talk about. Tell me if I'm wrong in the comments. Now, in this cold open, we see Lews Therin, and he's talking to this woman who we later find out is named Latra. They're talking about Lews Therin's plan, which should be to reseal the Dark One and to win this war that they've been fighting. However, as the conversation goes on, the way that they talk about it doesn't really sound anything like what's happening in the books. If you look at what they said, it isn't even really close. Lews Therin has apparently proposed his plan, and it's been shot down. And he says to this woman, "You're going to split the men and the women of the White Tower by doing this." And she says, "You've already done this by proposing this plan." And Lews Therin says, "You can't stop me. We have a chance here to do something that's never been done before. To cage the Dark One and to stop his influence from ever touching the world again." Also, from the way this is written, it kind of sounds like in caging the Dark One, evil itself is going to be eradicated from the world, which is not true at all. In fact, that's a huge plot point within the final book of the Wheel of Time that I don't even want to get into because of spoiler reasons. The woman he's talking to then says, "When you and I became Aes Sedai, we swore an oath to serve all. What you plan to do It serves only your pride. Now, do you see what I'm getting at here? Like, that is a huge departure from the books. It's not a prideful thing that Lews Therin goes and tries to steal away the Dark One. It's literally, like I've said before a bunch of times, it's a last-ditch effort. They are going to lose the war against the Shadow. Everyone's going to die. The Dark One's going to break free and kill everybody and overtake the world. It's just going to be terrible. And this is a last-ditch effort to win, to save lives, to save millions and millions and billions of people. But in the show, it's a prideful thing. Lews Therin responds to her and says, "You're wrong," to which she says, "You expose the very source of the one power to him. If he touches and corrupts it, your power will be out of control. It will run unchecked. You and your men could throw us back 1,000 years or more." Now, there's no way that she should have known this. I don't have a huge issue with it, but Lews Therin at least should have said something like, "You don't know that." But he does say, "If you help us, we won't fail." Because that's what the Wheel of Time story is, like in general. It's a story of men and women working together to accomplish things that, working separately, they couldn't really do. And so this idea that Lews Therin's putting out there that, you know, if you guys go with us, like, we're not going to lose to the Dark One. There's no chance that this power gets corrupted because we wouldn't let it. We'd be too strong combined for the Dark One. And instead of responding to that kind of reasonable statement, she kind of turns around and walks away and then turns back and says, "We will remain to pick up the pieces as best we can if you do." So instead of saying, "No, we can't do it," instead of saying, "You're totally wrong," instead of, responding to him, she pretty much just says, "Nah, I'm going to let you fail, and then us women will stay here to pick up the pieces." Then Lews Therin kind of chuckles, and the woman says, "What's wrong?" And he says, "To think, the fate of the world was decided in a nursery." And she says, "Nothing was decided here. The decision rests solely with you when you face him." Which is a statement that, while I'm looking at it now, may have some implications later on, but right now, based on the knowledge we have, it means nothing. Then to wrap up, she says, "This is just an imperfect, overwhelmed woman trying to remind her old friend that he is not invincible." Which is an understandable thing. Like, I'm not going to knock that. So then the conversation ends, and they state each other's honorifics and titles and all of that. And apparently this lady is the Tamerlane seat, which is obviously going to be the ancient variation of the Amerlin seat, which doesn't really fall in line with the books, because this woman, Latra, was not the leader of the Aes Sedai at the time. This cold open should have had her actually say what her plan was. So let me give you a quick description from the wiki. And this is from the page of Latra, that woman who Lews Therin was talking to. When the War of Power began to tip slowly but steadily in the favor of the Shadow, Lews Therin proposed taking a raiding party and a circle of the most powerful Aes Sedai to the side of the Boar in order to seal it and end the threat of the Dark One breaking free of his prison. However, this plan had a number of drawbacks that even Lews Therin admitted to, and thus had a significant number of detractors. The most prominent amongst them was Latra, who supported a plan that focused on using 2 giant sa'angreal that required 2 ter'angreal keys to use. The plan regarding them was to use the overwhelmingly huge amount of the one power that could be drawn through them to annihilate the armies of the Shadow, and then erect a barrier around Shale Ghul until a safe way to seal the Boar could be formulated. In order to make certain that Lews Therin did not implement his plan, she gathered every single female Aes Sedai on the side of the light who had a significant strength in the power, and had them vow not to support Lews Therin's plan. Without women, Lews Therin would not be able to form the circle needed to safely seal the Boar, which seemed to nix his plan then and there. However, her extremely vocal opposition to Lews Therin's plan, and particularly her decision to marshal support from a strictly female cadre, had the side effect of beginning the polarization of the Aes Sedai and the Hall of Servants along strictly male-female lines. Then, problems arising from the access keys being lost, and the sa'angreal themselves being threatened, forced Lews Therin to repropose his original strategy, as he believed that brute force would not serve to contain the Dark One at any rate. By that point, however, the polarization of the Hall had gotten so bad that even women with nowhere near enough strength to be considered for Lews Therin's raiding party had begun to side with Latra, and a number of male Aes Sedai had already disrupted meetings in the Hall itself. As such, Lews Therin decided to enact his plan without a circle, taking 100 companions to Shale Ghul and imperfectly patching the Boar. This, however, allowed the Dark One to taint Saidin, causing all male Aes Sedai to begin losing their minds, and immediately driving Lews Therin and his companions mad. Now, the thing that blows my mind is that none of these 3 or 4 paragraphs from the wiki of the Wheel of Time actually made it into the show to explain what was happening. Like, how hard would it be to explain that in a few sentences of dialogue instead of having them say that it was just like a pride thing? It's just stupid. It goes back to this idea that Lews Therin is actually just this arrogant idiot who thought he could somehow get rid of evil in the world, maybe, and this is what caused the breaking. After their conversation ends, and after he goes and sees his daughter, Lews Therin looks out the window over a city in the Age of Legends. Now, the depiction of the Age of Legends isn't what bothers me, because it seems fairly true to the descriptions we see in the books. They have flying vehicles, they have large towers, they have an insane, at least somewhat futuristic world that they live in. The problem is that it doesn't show a war-torn world where the last resort is for Lews Therin and his 99 companions to enact this plan to cage the Dark One. All that to say, it does seem like Moiraine is right in her cold open of episode 1. Lews Therin and his 99 companions did something idiotic and stupid that wasn't necessary and broke the world because of it. This show has changed the history of the Wheel of Time to make it so that Lews Therin was an idiot and caused the breaking of the world. Now, this is a massive change to the world and to the lore and the history of the Wheel of Time. And it's a change that's unnecessary and really seems like the writers changing the story for no reason other than to stroke their own egos, to try and create something quote-unquote better than the original and failing spectacularly. They're writing these important characters that are these huge leaders like Lews Therin to be complete idiots, to do something that no sane person would actually do. And it's a stupid way to write characters. It doesn't make sense. It's a stupid change. And because of this change, how are we ever supposed to see Lews Therin as this great leader, this great general, this great dragon that he's supposed to be? Yes, he did go mad in the end, but he won the War of Power. He was the general of the forces of the light. He wasn't just some prideful idiot. And spoilers for those of you who haven't read the books, but as Rand starts to channel and as the madness starts to seep into him, he starts having conversations with Lews Therin in his head. And I don't want to get into whether those conversations are real or whether he's just crazy, but the point is, if the show shows us these conversations, how are we supposed to trust anything Lews Therin says? How are we supposed to believe anything Lews Therin says? You know, there are very specific times within the books where Rand learns something or does something specifically because of that voice in his head. And so if we're led to believe that Lews Therin is this absolute idiot, that kind of changes the way we see Rand listening to that voice in his head. So I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. I think it adds huge changes to the overall story that's being told. It's not one of those things where it's a change in the adaptation for budget or for time. This is a story change for no reason. Could the showrunners add context later and make this entire video incorrect? Yeah, they could. But right now, based on what we have in Season 1, this is the story that's being presented. And it comes with a huge change that's in there for no discernible reason and provides no actual improvement to the overall story. Now, I know a lot of people will say this is a nitpick. It's a huge nitpick. You're just looking for things to hate about the show. And while I'm not looking for things to hate about the show, I do understand that it could be considered a nitpick. So my question to you, if you're saying that, is this. What in the story is improved by this change? Or if you're looking at this and you don't even think it is a change and it's just missing context, what in the story is improved by leaving out these details? Like, if you look at the story of the Wheel of Time, if you've read all the books, if you know all of the history and the lore, if you're a fan of Robert Jordan's original work, what is improved by this change? And please, leave the answer in the comments. I'll read them. And who knows, maybe you'll change my mind. I might pull your comments and make a video on it later saying that you're wrong, but if you've got a good argument, change my mind, for sure. I'll listen. Because in the end, I really love the Wheel of Time. I love the story. And if you're going to change the story, I want there to be a good reason behind it. I want to see where it's going, and I want to understand the change and see that it's a good choice. And I don't see that with this. You know, I tried to give the show the benefit of the doubt. I tried to give it the whole season to kind of establish its footing and to get some of that world building out there, and it just didn't do it. All that to say, let me know in the comments what you think. Is this a problem? Is this not a problem? Is this an important change? Is this a stupid change? I want to hear from you guys. So let me know what you think. Go ahead and like the video. Subscribe if you want to. I'm Fishers of Men, and I will talk to you later.